When you look at the green gap, the difference between what people say they'll do and what they really, really do, it's very, very high with this audience. So you've got an audience who has grown up digitally native, who understands that the world is connected and who cares about this stuff, but who actually doesn't really, really take action. It's kind of, sign up, post, like, share, retweet, done. But they're not actually shifting, they're not actually making change, and, this is coming at the expense of progress. So how do we get this audience to be advocates? And it's, it's not an audience where we need to tell them it's a problem. It's an audience where we need to get them to do something about it.
So we've already heard mention about the trendsetters, those people who are setting the trends. Yeah, the trendsetters are important, but then potentially there's also another aspect to the generation, that is the do-gooders. So who are the trendsetters? Those are the people who live in East London. They, as soon as they see a suit turn up in East London, they move further east. They are the no-logo generation. They support Naomi Klein. They say, this is not the future. Our future doesn't involve brands. But then the do-gooders, also in this generation, Adam's already mentioned his pretty brilliant project about leadership in the corporate sector. The do-gooders are driven by this sense of vocation and this inherent desire to try and step up and create their future. They want to get stuff done, but they don't want to sell out.
There is no longer an us except in a demographic sense. We don't feel an us because we are exposed to so many different faces of us and versions of us and variants of us now that the notion of a collective conscience is very much receded behind a notion of my individual choices.
Overall, our generation, you do expect a lot more from business. We've grown up with a much more inclusive global sense of the world. We've seen the realities of business as normal, Enron, BP, Barclays, all of this stuff has sort of been playing out over as we've been growing up, I suppose, over the formative periods of our lives. So I think there's a sense that as a sort of a cultural norm, we just expect more from business. The notion of profits are the only thing that matters is fairly alien to most Gen Ys, to most millennials.
One of the ways is looking at language differently. So we know that for this audience, sustainability is a word to just banish. For millennials, it is a word that means austerity, unemployment, budget cuts. It's not anything that anyone aspires to today.
People tend to find the environment, to echo some of this, to be a very heavy topic. That's not to say a stigmatized topic, but it is one that is not broadly advertised with their weak ties, with their neighbors. It's one that they mainly use to discuss with family members, with those that are very close, with those that are nearby, because it has a certain capability to bring down the conversation. The environmental movement has, in some respects, been its own worst enemy. By demonstrating the seriousness of the topic, it makes it feel very religious, almost, very like there's a penance and everyone feels guilt for not doing enough, which makes the task of doing anything all that more insurmountable.
What do you think the opportunity is for a brand? Are the days where they go out and do a raft of research that comes and says, we've looked into this market and this is exactly what they want and we shall now make the product for that market, can that still work?
The first rule of engagement is individualization. The second one for us is that this is generation purpose. There's a rise in values, it's the era of emotional marketing, and we have a generation who is searching for meaning, who is wondering whether they're going to be employed, what impact they're going to have on the world. And so what they're expecting of brands and what will help build trust is an answer to the question, why you exist, beyond just selling more stuff.
I think there probably is a sense of, and over time a growing sort of sense of antipathy, and sense, you see lots of campaigns come and go and some things change but then some things don't, which I think goes back perhaps to this sense of, well, with large organisations, what really is their purpose? Can we really believe in them? And I think your question earlier, which was, to what extent are consumers really going and buy stuff from companies? They might do it very briefly. Well, I think if you look at smaller organisations like Tom's Shoes, for example, which has been hugely successful, they are very consistent over time, and millennials, Gen Y, really believe in what they're doing. The larger organisations, Coke is is a fascinating example. You know, there's brilliant stuff environmentally, but then, you know, what does it say? Sugar, obesity, you know, what's it really doing? Have we really yet seen any corporations which are actually genuinely purpose-driven? I don't know.
It's that classic image of the big fish, and then trailing behind it, it's 100 small fish that make a bigger fish that can swallow the big fish. So it's not just one Goliath and one David. It's one Goliath and many, many Davids. And absolutely what Web 2.0, the internet connectivity, global connectivity, is doing for us is giving us a sense that not only are we fighting this on our own, we're not, we are actually out there in force, but secondly, maybe showing us how we can leverage our influence, and maybe over time we can see that that influence is going to have an impact.
People think sustainability is for women and it's a feminine issue, so we're basically missing half the population. So we talk about macho sustainability. So how do you talk about nature? Not in feminine terms as fragile and in need of protection, but in more masculine terms as like, be afraid, be very afraid. Nature is a force to be reckoned with. So whatever words we're putting behind it, there's also sort of the linguistics of it and the visual identity that we're giving this that needs to be a lot less feminine.
I can see those Guinness adverts with the surf coming in and they just put a new voiceover on top, for example, and that would be like a powerful sea and quite manly. Excellent.
I think previous generations where people would take a stand against bottled water, powdered milk, or whatever it was, and that would last a lifetime almost. So trying to change people's minds on that was very difficult. With this generation, we're seeing, hurrah, it's all about ethical fashion, and then 3 months later it's Coca-Cola and it's fighting against sugar and obesity, and then what's the next thing? So whilst when they're in it, and they will boycott those products, I think that it's a fleeting sense of engagement. So they are values-driven in that there will always be a cause, I think, but that cause shifts.
I don't need to label myself as an environmentalist to, you know, call BS on a corporation. It's just something that I can do, and someone else will retweet that, or they'll forward that, or they'll cheer along with that, which is to say, it's not just about how can we attract consumers, but how can we design our product lines, our transport lines in such a way that we're not caught out, because the likelihood of getting caught out is very high. If the NSA are caught out, you're going to be caught out.
I guess it's that kind of analogy about the plane is going to crash and you can be the pilot, that's completely fine. You do your shift, so long as you're not the pilot for the last hour, not a problem at all. And I see the Generation Yers as being the pilots in the last period of time where there's still an opportunity to avoid the climate impact which is there. And for me, that gives it a sense of urgency and makes it very relevant for this generation more than before.
There is a difference in approaching these people to educate them versus engagement. And more we're saying, you know, that conventional marketing funnel of bring people in and educate them, we're saying actually we need to flip that on its head. What we need these people to do is take action, and then we'll explain why afterwards.
We have to change the default, what the norm is, and that takes small numbers of people being very active and pulling in the right direction, such that everybody doesn't have to all the time.
It comes back to this point about choice editing and being net positive, and that is something that, with a true and sincere purpose behind it, is something that will gain the trust of an enlightened and potentially not so enlightened generation.